My parents skipped my wedding, then demanded I pay for my sister's. When I got married, my parents didn't come. No calls, no messages, just silence. I held out hope until the last second, staring at the doors, waiting for them to walk in and pretend they cared. But they didn't. For them, my wedding, the biggest day of my life, was just another Saturday. It wasn't surprising. They'd made their opinions clear. Weddings were frivolous, a waste of money. I should have just gone to a courthouse and saved myself the trouble. But it was never about money. It was about control. My younger sister, Melanie, was the golden child. She could do no wrong. While I spent my life trying to prove I was worthy of the same love and respect, I thought if I did everything right, they'd finally see me. I was wrong. Melanie, of course, showed up, but not without making a spectacle of herself. She arrived late, her dress just a little too close to white to be accidental, and spent the evening sulking at the back table, barely acknowledging me. When I finally confronted her, asking why our parents hadn't come, she scoffed. Why would they? It's just a wedding, not something important. That sentence burned itself into my mind. Not something important. But a year later, when Melanie got engaged, suddenly weddings were important. My parents, who dismissed my wedding as pointless, were now treating hers like the event of the decade. They gushed over venues, debated color schemes, and obsessed over every little detail. And then came the call. We were thinking, my mother began, her voice carefully measured, that you could help out with some of the costs, just a little bit, you know, to support your sister. I almost laughed. Oh, I said, keeping my tone neutral, like how you supported me when I got married. Silence. Then my father cut in, sharp and dismissive. Your wedding was a completely different situation. Right, different, because it was mine. Still, I played along. How much? My mother perked up, sensing an opportunity. Well, the venue alone is $20,000. And then there's catering, the dress, the flowers. I interrupted. How much do you want me to pay? There was a pause. $10,000. I exhaled slowly. No. And just like that, the pleasantries were gone. You're being selfish, my father snapped. Melanie would do this for you. I let out a humorless chuckle. Would she? Because I don't remember her offering to help when I was struggling to pay for my own wedding. My mother's tone softened, switching to manipulation. This is what family does. Family. That word had been used against me my entire life. Growing up, everything was about Melanie. She got whatever she wanted, extracurriculars, study abroad trips, financial help, while I was told to figure things out on my own. Yet, somehow, I still kept trying. When Melanie graduated, I was already working full-time, saving money, being responsible, but that didn't stop my parents from expecting me to support her. She's still figuring things out, my mom would say. You're more stable. So I paid. At first, it was small things, groceries, phone bills, then rent, car repairs, even vacations. Every time I hesitated, my parents shut me down. Your family helps. But help only ever flowed in one direction. When I got engaged, I foolishly thought things would change. I invited my parents, hoping they'd finally be happy for me. Instead, they went on vacation with Melanie that weekend. I should have cut them off then. But I didn't. So when they came to me for money, expecting it as a given, I thought saying no would be enough. I was wrong. The escalation. First, it was guilt-tripping. Calls from my mother. Messages from my father. Think about what you're doing. Do you really want to be the reason your sister's wedding is ruined? Then Melanie got involved. You're seriously not helping? She texted. It's just money. You make plenty. Why are you being so bitter? Bitter. That word stung more than it should have. She had no idea what I had sacrificed for her. I didn't reply. A week later, the messages changed. No more fake concern, just anger. You think you're better than us? My father snarled over the phone. You think just because you got married and moved out, you're too good for your family? I almost laughed at how predictable it was. No, I said calmly. I just think it's time you figured things out without me. The breaking point. The next day, I got an email from Melanie's fiancé, Jason. Subject, let's talk. Hey, I don't know what's going on between you and your family, but this is getting out of hand. Your parents are really upset, and Melanie is stressed beyond belief. I get that there's history here, but maybe we can come to some kind of compromise. You don't have to pay the full $10,000, but if you could contribute something, it would mean a lot. Let's talk. I stared at the screen for a long time. Jason was a decent guy. This wasn't his fight. I closed the email without replying. That was my second mistake. Because after that, things went nuclear. Melanie went full victim mode. She started posting vague, dramatic updates on social media about certain people who don't care about family. She made sure to mention how heartbroken she was that some loved ones were refusing to support her. The messages poured in. Mutual friends, extended family, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. What's going on? Why aren't you helping Melanie? Dude, it's just money, don't be that guy. At first, I ignored it. Then I started getting messages from my parents' friends, people I barely knew. I always thought you were a good son. Guess I was wrong. This is disgraceful. Your poor mother is beside herself. You should be ashamed. And that final word, was what pushed me over the edge. I had spent my whole life drowning in shame that I wasn't good enough. Shame that I wasn't the child they wanted. Shame that no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. But now, I was done. If they wanted to call me selfish, I'd show them what selfish really looked like. No more money, no more answering calls, no more pretending we were a family. They made their choice a long time ago. Now, I was making mine. I knew the final conversation with my parents would be ugly, but even I wasn't prepared for just how ugly. They insisted we meet in person. We'll talk like adults, my mother had said. I knew better. This wouldn't be a conversation, it would be an ambush. When I arrived at my parents' house, they were waiting, my mother, my father, and, of course, Melanie. She sat on the couch, arms crossed, face already flushed with anger. Sit down, my father ordered. I stayed standing. He didn't hesitate. Let's talk about your disgraceful behavior. I almost laughed. Disgraceful? Because I refused to hand over $10,000? This isn't about money, my mother snapped. This is about family. You don't turn your back on blood. I glanced at Melanie. She gripped her phone, jaw clenched. Tell me, Melanie, I asked, voice calm, if I needed help, would you do the same for me? She rolled her eyes. Don't be ridiculous. You have a great job. You're just being cheap. Cheap? I let out a hollow laugh. Do you even remember how much I've helped you? Your rent, your bills, every time you got yourself into trouble, I bailed you out. You're my brother. That's what you're supposed to do. And there it was. I exhaled slowly, then pulled out my phone, opening a document, a record of every dollar I had given her over the last 10 years. I turned the screen toward them. $28,700. I let the number sink in, not counting birthday gifts, small favors, or the times I helped mom and dad. Silence. I never asked for anything in return. I continued, but the first time I say no, I'm the villain? My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough of this nonsense. We are family, and family helps each other. I met his eyes, steady. Then where were you when I needed help? My mother gasped. How can you say that? We've always supported you. I shook my head, almost amused. Really? Then why didn't you come to my wedding? Their faces darkened. Melanie shot to her feet, pointing a shaking finger at me. You just want to punish us because you're miserable. You've always been jealous because mom and dad love me more. I waited for the pain to hit. But it didn't. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. I was never family to them. I was a bank account. I'm done, I said, voice steady. From this moment on, I am no longer part of this family. You made your choice, now, I'm making mine. My father stood, fury burning in his eyes. If you walk out that door, don't come back. I smiled. Perfect. I turned and left. Behind me, Melanie screamed. My mother sobbed, but I didn't look back. My phone buzzed as I got into my car. My father's name flashed on the screen. I silenced it. They could cry, yell, threaten all they wanted. I was finally free. But I had underestimated them. I thought cutting them off would be the end of it. I was wrong. The storm was just beginning. The fallout. The first few days were an explosion of calls and messages. My parents, Melanie, distant relatives who had no business interfering. The messages swung from guilt-tripping to outright threats. Mom, please. Sweetheart, don't do this. We're family. Dad, you're being childish. Call us back. Melanie, you're so selfish. I hope you end up alone. Aunt Linda, I don't know what's happening, but your mother is in tears. Fix this. I ignored them all. For the first time in my life, there was silence. No demands. No expectations. No weight pressing down on my chest. I had always thought family was supposed to feel like home. But now that I had shut the door on them, I realized my home had never been with them in the first place. The guilt tactics. Less than a week later, my mother switched from anger to desperation. Voicemail after voicemail, her voice trembling, teetering on the edge of tears. I don't understand how you can be so cruel to your own family. Melanie's so stressed about the wedding, she says she doesn't even want to go through with it anymore. Is that what you wanted? I miss you, sweetheart. Can we just talk? I almost believed that last one. Almost. But I knew better. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could do for them. They missed my money. They missed my compliance. They missed their control over me. It wasn't me they wanted back. It was the version of me they could manipulate. The sabotage attempt. 2 weeks later, things escalated. I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, my stomach dropped. It was my boss. Hey, just wanted to check in. Your father called, said he was worried about you, that you were acting erratically and making reckless financial decisions. He asked if we could help. Call me back. I went cold. They were trying to ruin my job. I called my boss immediately, my hand steady, my voice firm. This was war. He listened in silence, then exhaled slowly. That's manipulative nonsense, he said. Don't let it get to you, just focus on work. If they call again, I'll handle it. I hung up, my hands trembling. It wasn't just disappointment, they saw me as a traitor. If they couldn't control me, they'd rather see me fail. And that was the moment I knew, without a shred of doubt, that I'd made the right choice. Then came the silence. No more calls, no voicemails, no desperate attempts to pull me back in. At first, I thought it was over, but I was wrong. They weren't done, they were just regrouping. The message. 2 months passed. Life became quieter, easier. I poured myself into work, went out more. For the first time in years, I started enjoying my own life. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Melanie, I hope you're happy. The wedding is cancelled. Mom and Dad blame you. I blame you. You ruined everything. I read it twice, then deleted it. Because, for the first time, I truly didn't care. The final attempt. 3 months later, just when I thought they had finally let go, my mother showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find her standing there, clutching her purse, her eyes swollen from crying. I should have shut the door, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped outside and folded my arms. What do you want? She sniffled. Can we talk? I didn't answer, just waited. She took a deep breath. Your father isn't doing well. This whole situation has put so much stress on him. He's not sleeping, barely eating. I stayed silent. She tried again. I know we made mistakes. I know things got complicated. But we're still your family. That word, family. A word they had wielded like a weapon. A leash to keep me bound. But it didn't work anymore. I'm not coming back, Mom, I said, my voice steady. Her face fell. You can't mean that. I do. Her expression twisted. So that's it? You're abandoning us? I let out a short, humorless laugh. You abandoned me years ago. I'm just finally returning the favor. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't even recognize you anymore. I met her gaze. Maybe that's because, for the first time, I'm not bending over backwards for you. She shook her head, voice trembling. You'll regret this. I stepped back inside. No, I won't. Then, I closed the door. Moving forward, that was the last time I saw my mother. Through distant relatives, I heard that Melanie had a smaller, cheaper wedding. My parents weren't happy about it. They blamed me for everything. I expected that. What I didn't expect was how good it would feel to finally be free. No guilt. No manipulation. No longer being treated like an ATM instead of a son. For the first time, I was living for myself, and I had never been happier. I used to believe family was forever, that if I just proved myself enough, worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, they would finally see my worth. That day never came. And now, I knew it never would.